Okay, guys, just our first video here for the grade 9 academic class. So this is the note that we have in class, a little bit messed up due to some photocopying issues, but that's all right. We start off with integer review, looking at multiplying and dividing integers. So this video will just go over some of the review stuff, and then we'll get into exponents also. The first thing you want to notice when you multiply integers is there's two parts to your answer. You're going to have a sign part and you're going to have a number part. So when you look at a question like this where you have -2 and 10, what you want to do is multiply the numbers to get, oh, that was loud, to get 20. And then you look at the signs and you have one's negative, so your answer will be negative. Okay, so up above here, we look at what happens with the signs. Two positives, multiplying two positives to get a positive. Multiplying two negatives gets you a positive and a negative gets you a negative, and a negative and a positive gets a negative. And if you keep going, if you have more than one sign, so for example, if you had three negatives in a row, like -1 times -2 times -3, then there's your multiplying. And we put the bracket around numbers to show that they're multiplying. What you would do is for the sign, you would go negative times a negative is a positive, and then you'd have a positive times a negative is a negative. So the sign rules kind of keep going and going. So that's the same sort of thing as you see in B here. You have multiple signs, and a negative and a negative get you a positive. So here what I did was I multiplied the first two numbers to get +16, and then after that I multiplied 16 by 3 to get 48. So it's up to you how you want to do this. You can multiply all of them together in one step, or you can multiply these two. It wouldn't matter. This would be -2 times -24. And then from there, you would get minus times a minus is a plus, and 2 times 24 is 48. Same with division. You get the number, and then you get the sign, or vice versa. You can do the sign first and say, I have a negative, I have a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. Okay, you can do that, and then 20 divided by 10 is 2. Division can also be represented as a fraction. So here I have -4 divided by -2, but we wrote it like this, -4 over -2. Same thing, two negatives make a positive. 4 divided by 2 is +2. Same rules apply when you're adding and subtracting integers in that I don't do any questions, and I would advise you to do the same. Don't do a question like this when you have back-to-back signs. You want to get rid of two signs in a row and make them one sign. So if you, again, two positives turn into positive, two negatives turn into positive, sorry, and if the signs are different, you're negative. And what happened, why is that the case? We went over that in class probably, hopefully. And what you have here is the same thing as saying +1 times +2. Okay, this positive outside is the equivalent of a +1. So you're multiplying this positive with the positive 2, and the same rules apply as above for signs. So if you had, for example, -3, something like that, what you're really doing is -1 times -3, and figuring out what that is, and then adding and subtracting it from the other number. So let's go back here. I got my eraser. I can't even see this. Let's go back here and take a look at what's going on. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's look at 9 + 2. 9 + 2 becomes 9 + 2. The two positives turn into one positive, and then you go from there and get 9 + 2 is 11. So what I'll say over and over again is once you get your single signs, if we're looking at just single integers like this, you can always use a calculator, but if you're going to do it in your head, what I would just do is I would think to myself, temperature, always temperature, okay? It's 9 out, it goes up 2, we're at 11 degrees, a nice balmy 11 degrees. Here in B, I have -4 plus -7. I don't do this question until I get rid of the two signs. A plus and a minus becomes a minus. I have -4 -7, it's -11. Over at C, same thing, a plus and a minus become a negative. 4 -7, it's 4 out, it goes down 7, we're at -3. Here, don't make things too difficult. -9 -2, you can see the -11. And then with questions with multiple integers and multiple adding and subtracting, just go through and clean up the brackets first. Okay, clean up the signs first. So a plus and a minus becomes a minus and a minus becomes a plus. 8 - 2 is 6. 6 + 4 is 10. So you can do this in one step. You can go in different order if you feel like it. -2 + 4 would get you +2. You'd have 8 + 2 is 10. Either way, you get 10. Two negatives are a plus. That stays the way it is. Okay, get rid of these brackets. So here, don't get overly confused by this. This is minus. It's the same as minus plus, or just a minus by itself, one sign. So negative, 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 minus and a minus and a plus, and then add those up. Okay, so that's basic integer work there. We're going to go on with exponents for the rest of this video. You got a base, and then you have the exponent. So 2 to the 3 is 2 times 2 times 2. So it's how many times you see the 2. 1, 2, 3. That's your 3. That's exponential form. And we went through this here, going through all this, and then we look at expansion. Now, the one thing that we're going to look at is with negatives and brackets. The difference between the -2 in a bracket versus -2 outside of a bracket, there's two different things. When there are brackets, you're going to multiply the base by a certain amount of time. So for example, -2 cubed is -2 times -2 times -2. So that is going to then be -2 times -2 is +4 times -2 is -8. So that got chopped off there in my photocopying. We'll get to that in a second, more about the minuses below. But actually, no, let's stick with it for a second. If I don't have a bracket, so in question C here, you'll see no bracket. But if I had -2 cubed, this one here, the first one with the bracket, is -2 cubed. This is the negative of 2 cubed. So in this case, you have the same answer, right? But in other cases, you wouldn't. For example, let's just make the basic case here. If I have -2 squared, okay, this is -2 squared, which means -2 times -2. And that's going to be minus times a minus is a plus. 2 times 2 is 4, and I end up with +4. So -2 squared is +4. The minus of 2 squared, or the negative of 2 squared, is the negative of 2 times 2. Okay, so of the 2 times 2. So you would multiply the 2 times the 2 and get -4. So if you follow that, that's great. If not, if you want to know the basic rules, it works this way. If there is no, I'm just cleaning everything up here. If there is no bracket, then your answer is negative, because it's the negative of an answer. Okay. If there is a bracket, if the exponent is odd, then you're going to have an odd number of negatives, and an odd number of negatives will get you to negative overall. Okay. Because a minus times a minus times a minus, there's 3 negatives, that's a negative. If you multiply by another negative, you get a positive. So if it's even, if this number up here, sorry, let me just get back to this here. If this number up here, the exponent, is even, then you'll have a positive final answer. If the exponent is odd, then you're multiplying by an odd number of negatives, and that will get you a negative final answer. Okay, so just remember that as you go forward. You can always use your calculator for this, but often the calculator doesn't do what you want it to do when it comes to negatives. But if you use brackets, you should be fine if you want to use your calculator. Anyway, 2 to the 5 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's 32. -4 squared, so here's our bracket with a negative. That's -4. This is -4 times -4. And -4 times -4 is plus. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so 2 negatives get you a positive. This one is -4 squared, so this is the negative of 4 times 4, and 4 times 4 is 16, and this answer is negative. So no bracket, automatically negative answer. This guy here, we just throw in the calculator. And this one here, a couple steps. If you have, let's just look at this right now. If you have 2/3 cubed, we're going to get rid of that negative. Ignore it for a second. With a fraction, you're going to have 2 cubed over 3 cubed. And that's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Okay, so you could expand these as 2 times 2 times 2 and 3 times 3 times 3. Or throw each of those in the calculator and you end up with 8 over 27. Now, because it's a negative in front, in this case, what you have to say again is this is odd, so my final answer is negative. So it's -2/3. I'm just going to expand this now, times -2/3 times -2/3. And when you multiply a fraction, you multiply the tops by each other. So you have -2 times -2 times -2 is -8. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So where does that negative go? Does it go on top or in front? It doesn't matter. Okay, but either way, no matter what, your final answer is negative. Okay, so that's it for the basics of exponents. If you want to look at the exponent laws, what we discovered in class is that when two bases are the same and you multiply two exponents like this, you're going to end up adding the exponents. So here you have 5 squared times 5 to the 4, and that ends up to be 5 to the 6. So we went over that in class, how that's expanded 5 times 5 times 5, sorry, 5 times 5 times this, 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, and there's 6 of them. And if you do it a bunch of times, you realize that that's the rule. If the bases are the same, you add the exponents. So we just went through that in class. There's the overall rule. When you divide, what ends up happening is if the bases are the same, you subtract the exponents. So this becomes, so for example, if you want to just even expand this, what you end up with is 3 times 3 is 9, 81 divided by 9, and that is 9, which is the same as 3 squared, which is 9. So if the bases are the same and you have exponents, you're going to subtract them when you're dividing. Again, that's division, they're both division. And if you're multiplying, you add, and if it's a power to a power, what we discovered is you multiply. So if you have 2 squared cubed, 2 times 3 is 6, you end up with 2 to the 6. 10 to the 4 to the 2, 4 times 2 is 8, 10 to the 8. And overall, x to the AB is x to the A times B. So we did a bunch of questions in class here. You have 7, 3, and 6. They're multiplying. So what you do when you multiply is you'll add. That's a mistake there. That should be 7 plus 3 plus 6, and that's 16. If you have a base that's a number instead of a variable, we'll get to more on that later, but what you can do is evaluate. So this is -1 cubed cubed. 3 times 3 is 9. Power of a power says multiply. So you have -1 to the 9. -1 to the 9 is going to be, that's odd, so your final answer is negative. 1 to the 9 or 1 to the anything is 1, so you end up with that. 5, 9 divided by 5 to the 6, you're going to subtract because you're dividing. 9 subtract 6 is 3. 5 cubed is 125, I think. 5 times 5, I don't know why I did that. 125, 5 times 5 is 25 times 5 is 125, yep. And you can just go from there. One thing to notice is here, if you end up with this, probably shouldn't have done this question yet, but if you end up with a question like this, the exponents here, the 4 and the 4 are added, so that's consistent because we're multiplying. Remember that dot means multiplying. But you're also going to have these coefficients out here, which we get to in a bit. 2 times 5 is going to be in the front here, and 2 times 5 is 10. And then if you have questions with multiple steps, you can just go through the steps. You can go in any way you want, actually. So over here, I have 4 and 7, 4 and 7, add to 11, and 11 over 11 is 0. And then we talked about this in class, I'm sure. X to the 0 is, in fact, 1, because you have, when you obey these rules here, you subtract to get 0, but anything over itself is 0. So 2 over, or sorry, is 1. 2 over 2 is 1. A over A is 1. X over 11, x to the 11 over x to the 11 is 1. So in general, anything to the 0 is 1. Okay, so there's some advanced questions too that you can go through here. Yeah, so I rewrote this question as this. Okay, so ignore this. Let's go to this one here. 8. What's going on here? That should be 8, 6. Oh, sorry. This should be a 4. So let me just clean this up. 8. So if we had this question, 8y10 x10 over 6x8y squared, you just go through everything. You go through the numbers first. 8 divided by 6 would be 4/3 in lowest terms. I have y to the 10, y squared, subtract them. This is wrong. This is y to the 8. And then I got these backwards. And x to the 10, x to the 8, subtract these. That's that. Okay, x squared, y to the 8. And then just if you have more questions, if you have complex questions, you just apply the same rule. So here you're going to have multiplying. You multiply the numbers first, 7, 10, and 2. We'll get you 144. V cubed, v to the 5, and v to the 3. You add these up to get v to the 11. This is u cubed and u, and this hasn't come up yet, but if you just have u by itself, it's u to the 1, and 3 plus 1 is 4. So that's the basic exponent rules.